Welcome to my second video tutorial for Cheetah 3D. This is going to be a real quickie. I'm going to go to breakneck speed. I'm going to assume you know your way around Cheetah 3D, that you're a fabulous box modeler, and I'm really going to show you the results and then how you get there. Kind of the reverse of the previous thing, because it simply would take too long to go through this particular thing step by step. And if there's demand for tutorials covering individual components of this process, I'm happy to do that at a later date. So we're talking about UV modeling here, and let me show you the finished product. So this is a much evolved version of our biplane, and you'll see a number of things as we turn it around. It's got rubber tires, which are not which are black and they're not glossy. It's got a semi-gloss propeller. Well, it's hard to tell. It's got a glossy and transparent windscreen, and it's got a shiny black gun. And this has all been achieved with exactly one texture. And you'll see this texture has a color map, a specular map, and a texture map. And this is despite the fact that it's actually made out of lots of different pieces. So what's happened is that this plane has been UV mapped to an inch of its life. There's a UV map for the struts, there's a UV map for the gun, there's a UV map for the propeller, and there's a UV map for the box. And if we go into UV editing mode, you'll see that the fuselage is mapped all over the place like this, and that the struts are mapped into this corner here, the gun is mapped over here, the propeller is mapped over there. So the propeller is in this spot here, the gun is in this spot here, the struts are in this spot here, and the rest of the plane gets the rest of the UV map. And that's how it works. That's all there is to it. How did we get from the earlier model to the untextured model here to that? Well, we had to unwrap it. And we had to unwrap it piece by piece. So I took this box, and first of all I had to put seams in. And the way to insert the seams is really, in a sense, to think, well, what would I, if I wanted to sew this thing out of material from bolts of cloth and stitch it together and then hang it over a frame, how would I have to plan it? And you have to do this. Essentially, what you want is to make sure that you've divided the plane up into sets of polygons that don't contain any loops, and that don't contain, basically that don't contain any loops. So if this edge here, if this crease weren't here, then this thing would loop over around to here, which would still be okay, but the wing would kind of unwrap in one big piece, and that wouldn't make our lives particularly easy. But similarly, for example, here the engine texture is going to be markedly different from the fuselage, so I put in a seam where the fuselage meets the engine. I put a fuselage where the tire meets the wheel, and then I put a seam here so that the wheel can be unwrapped into a flat piece. And if we go and have a look at the UV model, at the UV map here, you can see the mapping between things. So for example, if I click on the tire, I get one of these polygons here. If I click on one of these polygons, I get polygons on the tire. Obviously that's the fuselage. I can go here. This here is the cockpit, the cockpit glass. There's no easy way to do this. Once you've done all of the seams, you simply go and first of all you select all of the polygons, and then you unwrap UV. Now when I do this, it's going to muck everything up. Now let's suppose that we were trying to improve this bit. We could area select this bit here, and we could realign it and move it back where we wanted it. You can remap individual pieces that don't seem to be coming out too well, so we can area select over here, and we can say, oh, we don't like that, can you have another shot at it? So we can unwrap UV again, and it will unwrap it differently. Not necessarily better, but differently. And you may notice that when you're doing it, you'll make mistakes. You won't have made a seam somewhere you need to make, or you'll have made a seam in the wrong place. You can go and change that, and then you can just re-unwrap the bits that haven't been gotten right yet. It's a long, painstaking process, but that's how you get a nice UV map. And so that's essentially the principles of UV unwrapping and UV mapping. It allows you to use one material to completely texture your entire model. And the material that you create ends up being much more complicated than a typical material. This one has a texture map, a specular map, and a transparency map, whereas often you'd get away without, say, having any of them. If I were just modeling the windscreen here, I would probably not use any bitmaps at all. I would probably just have a color and a transparency and a couple of other properties. But because I want to use one material for the entire model, I have to use quite a complex material which can be transparent in some areas and shiny in some areas and not in others. The benefit of this is that 3D engines are much more efficient at rendering a lot of polygons that all have one set of material settings than they are rendering a bunch of polygons which have different material settings, because basically OpenGL and most graphics cards are very modal devices, and so you're essentially telling the machine, look, I set the texture map to this and then draw these polygons. And because that's the way the graphics card works, this way of modeling is very optimal for real-time graphics. So that is UV mapping, and this is the final product. Very, very nice way of packaging your model. It also has the benefit that, for example, you can come back and do 5 different variants of the plane simply by modifying one texture map. So that's it, UV mapping 101. Let me know on the forums if you have any other specific requirements. Ta-ta!